Hello and welcome to Kindred Academy, the show that deals with all things Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. I'm Peter.
And I'm Carlos, and on today's lesson, Clan Nosferatu.
So Clan Nosferatu have one of the most well-known curses of all the vampires in that they are disfigured by the curse and it appears in their faces, in their bodies, and they are often forced to retreat from mainstream society, hiding in the sewers, hiding in the shadows, hiding in the dark corners of the internet.
Now, the history of the Nosferatu has a little bit, according to the lore, a little bit of internal flavor. So the third generation antediluvian, the founder of the bloodline, Absimliard, was a very beautiful and very skillful hunter. And when he was embraced, he had this slight marking that, marred his face. He was really cross about that. Now, that being said, the Absimliard started siring a group of other hunters and people that were of his mind, also beautiful and most of them very vain. One of them was a maiden that managed to run away. Now, at some point, Cain cursed the bloodline of Absimliard. Even the maiden that had escaped received the curse in which they will show their ugliness on their skin, on the outside. That, of course, made Absimliard and his brood very angry with the other, especially other people that had been sired by this maiden and that they started having their own sort of thing, but also against the second generation vampires and other kindreds as a whole. So this group is called the Niktuku, and the Niktuku is sort of like the boogeyman tale that creates a little bit of lore-based internal strife for the Nosferatu. The Nosferatu as a whole, the ones that were proponents of the formation of the Camarilla and have been always working as information brokers or spies for other clans, are mostly descendant from this maiden, the matriarch. And you have the Niktuku, very old and very powerful vampires that want to destroy them all before they go on and destroy the rest of Kindred. So a little bit of shadow wars or civil war in the shadows, or in the dark, in the tunnels, is very like a very preeminent thing that you could use if you want to exploit the lore. Now, throughout history, the Nosferatu have not had a very interesting, or at least nice or kind history. They have been always at the fringes. During the Dark Ages, they had to make themselves look like lepers so they could be sometimes accepted around society, but most of the time they would be on the outside of the cities, living in the wild, unless they were princes of some of sub-Saharan cities that at the time would not consider them to be completely hideous, but also actually be something of a godsend. Now, during the Renaissance and the Industrial era and the Victorian era, with the advent of all of these things like sewers and a underground city that could allow them to go back from the wilderness into the cities, they started growing as some people would say as a tumor, others as a necessity of what would be needed. The Renaissance was particularly hard, in which human and physical beauty was equated to the beauty of your soul. So most of the Nosferatu would be shunned as ugly, both inside and outside, whilst the Nosferatu actually retort saying that their curse is the one that does not touch their soul because it deforms their bodies. In the modern knights, they are experts of information, especially in the digital era, and at some point they had their parallel internet, if you will, called the ShrekNet. It was an information hub that they would use to stay connected, but also on top of things. Sadly, the Second Inquisition managed to hack into the system and get access to very sensitive information, making them proponents of the fall of great cities like London or the Chantry in Vienna. So that puts them in the red ledger for a lot of the other clans.
So the Clan Nosferatu, of course, have gifts of the blood like all of the other clans, and there is a theme of something about the kind of the monstrous about the Nosferatu, and part of that also is having monstrous levels of strength. So they have the Potence discipline, which allows them to leap up onto rooftops and kind of hang out with the gargoyles. It allows them to carry away their prey if they wish to, and just generally to smash things if you get on their nerves.
Now, the most iconic discipline of the Nosferatu would be that of obfuscate. So this is the one they would use to either hide in the shadows or pass unseen, but also to pass themselves as normal humans or vanish from minds from the side of others. And importantly, some of the most powerful uses of the discipline can share this sort of cloak of protection using obfuscate to have their whole groups being shadowed or being disguised.
Now, we've mentioned that there is something of a kind of bestial nature about the Nosferatu, that that kind of cursed part of their soul is worn on their face and worn on their sleeve. And so they also have the discipline of animalism. They have a relationship with the beast that is closer than many of the other clans. Not only does this allow them to relate to the beast itself, but also to some of the animals that dwell, typically things like rats, in the sewers alongside them, and they can use those to their own ends. Of course, like all of the other clans, there are certain amalgam powers that tend to be accessible only to the Nosferatu that give them a certain edge.
And the most iconic one would be the Unliving Hive. So this is a obfuscate animalism amalgam power, and the only clan to have that combination would be in the Nosferatu, in which you gain a couple of benefits. The first one would be that the range of the animalism, that your powers of animalism would now extend to include insects, which is something that is not commonly part of animalism as a discipline. We will talk about it in a further episode. But also, it allows those insects to reside within the Nosferatu in those empty places like their guts or their lungs or their stomach they have no use for, and feed on their vitae and become stronger. So you will have both access to controlling insects, but also use animalism to have them as spies, potentially making a mess of things.
So we've mentioned the gifts, and we've also earlier mentioned the curse of the clan, but it's worth spending a bit more time with it, especially if you are used to playing old editions of Vampire, because V5 handles things slightly differently. So it used to be the case that if you were a Nosferatu, you were instantly turned into a monster of sorts, and you were unable to go into normal society unless you had magical powers of the blood to disguise your appearance in some way. However, things are a little different here. So depending on your Bane severity, that will impact on how much the curse is affecting you. So a newly minted Nosferatu vampire with blood potency 1 will be repulsive, absolutely. And it will be harder for them to interact with people, and they will be very memorable if someone does interact with them, which can cause its own problems. But they can pass as human. They can interact with people if they want to. It's just difficult. However, as they get older and as the blood thickens and becomes more powerful, so too does the curse. So very old Nosferatu will be monstrous, will be inhuman in their appearance, and will have to either hide or use very potent disciplines to try, and I say the word try here deliberately, and disguise themselves as human.
Yeah, because the Bane severity of the Nosferatu will also apply as a penalty to use disciplines to hide their features. It's not only a penalty on their ability to disguise themselves using whatever means they have, it will be also a penalty on powers of obfuscate and the like.
So you may at this point be saying, great, I want to play a Nosferatu, but I'm not really sure where to begin. And as always, we would direct you to the core book because there are good examples there, but we'd also like to give you a couple of our own to help get you started.
So one of those is using our approaches that we discussed on character creation video. It would be the Kindred first. So right now we're focusing on one aspect that we want to build the character around, and it would be their curse and how someone who is very sociable goes around it. And this would be a character who is a wrestler. And for those who have seen professional wrestling, especially Mexican wrestling, you would see things like people who wear the masks. And there is a very iconic wrestling figure in Mexico. It's called El Santo. There was, like, I think it was in the 50s or 60s, there was a series of him, and he would be sort of this masked hero, but he was a wrestler. So I'm thinking a very high potent, very physically strong entertainer and performer who would be even famous, but his disfigurement, in unlike V20 and previous editions, he would have the newer V5 Bane, in which the moment he takes off his mask, it would be very difficult not to think that this guy's a monster, but he will always wear it. Probably having a retainer, a very skilled body double, so he can have performance during the day. But you can have someone that is a Nosferatu, very scary in physical combat, but definitely at the forefront of society, being someone that can be actually the face of the clan, even in court.
So an alternate example, maybe on a more kind of traditional route, is something where we're exploring the themes of loss. And this is a character who has been embraced in a hateful manner by their sire. So not that they've been embraced and then taught the ways of things, they've been embraced and abandoned. And when this character goes back, of course, they're now changed in their appearance. So their partner and their children and the rest of their family fail to recognize them and are repulsed and horrified by them. And so they are forced to retreat kind of alone into the shadows. And the only one that recognizes them and remains true to them is their dog. So this is a character who would probably have a little bit of animalism and a little bit of obfuscate, and will be a bit of sort of a tragic, lost figure with only their dog for company.
But now it's time for homework, and we have talked about a couple of examples of how to play very different Nosferatu, but would like to hear it from you. So leave a comment below telling us what sort of Nosferatu you have played or would like to play, and what different approaches from the archetype and the stereotype of the sewer rat, or that sort of information broker, would you come up with? Because the Nosferatu is one of those clans that can embrace pretty much everybody, and they will have a use for all of them. So in the meantime, make sure to like and subscribe, hit that bell notification, and we will see you in the next lesson. Bye.
Bye. Am I ready? That's the question. No.
That is a question.
Oh man.